Welcome to AIDS Vision. I'm your volunteer host, Allison Arngrim. Today on AIDS Vision, we're going to be discussing clinical trials and issues of experimental treatments for AIDS. With us is Stephan Korsia, who is the volunteer clinical trials specialist for AIDS Project Los Angeles, and he is also a member of the Treatment Issues Subcommittee of ACT UP Los Angeles. Welcome, Stephan.
Thank you.
For our purposes, we need to explain to people what a clinical trial even is. We've heard about them, we read all these things in the paper about experimental drugs. There's a lot of terminology involved, a lot of different type of trials. What exactly is a clinical trial and what is its purpose?
Well, a clinical trial is it's an experiment using humans, patients, to try a new drug or a new treatment. That's the final stage before drug approval. They discover a drug, they test it in a test tube, then on mice, and then finally they have to test it on patients. So there's different type of clinical trials because a drug requires several type of assays to be tested and approved. The first one are the phase 1 trials. They involve only a few people, and their goal is to test for the toxicity.
That's to see if people can take it at all.
Yeah, and they try to find the dose which is toxic, and so after that they're going to work below this dose. The second type of trials are the phase 2 trials, and they involve a larger number of people, and they test for the effectiveness of the drug and also for more long-term toxicity. Though they last longer, they last a year or two, and usually for AIDS drugs related to HIV disease, this phase is the last one, because the phase 3, which is a comparative study between what exists as a treatment and the new drug, doesn't exist for diseases that are life-threatening. So for HIV-related drugs, after phase 2, they are usually approved if they work and released on the market.
Are there ever phase 3 where, say, they compare a very new drug to something like AZT?
Yeah, but they are usually a phase 2 for the new drug. They stop after, or they are called phase 2, 3, but there's no, the real phase 3 trials involve thousands of people for years, and with HIV we don't have time for that.
We don't have time. Something that's been brought up a lot is people use the term placebo studies, especially in phase 2, where they're comparing it.
Yeah, in phase 2 they have to compare the new drug with something else, so that they see an effect compared to something they know. So when there's no drug available, as at the beginning with HIV, they had to use a placebo, which is the sugar pill, nothing, water. And that was it's a lot of problem, because when you do a trial for years on patients that are sick, it's basically nothing different than watching them getting sicker and die. And a lot of people and AIDS activists especially had problems with seeing people being given placebo. So now there's new ways to prevent that. First, we have AZT, which is approved, so we can test a new drug against AZT and compare AZT and the new drug. And so the people that are not taking the new drug are taking a treatment.
So they're not left hanging. They are given something. They're not just asked to be in this study and have nothing. I've also heard the term crossover study. How does that work?
That's a very fair way to do a trial when you have to use a placebo. Which is that the people some people receive the placebo, some people receive the new drug. After 6 months, they change, meaning that the people that receive the placebo start receiving a new drug, and people that receive the new drug start receive the placebo. So there's not one all placebo, one all new drug groups, but they share the burden.
So the people doing the trials still get their results and their data, but no one is sacrificed for this.
Exactly.
That's good. There's more terminology still. The one we see a lot in the newspaper is compassionate use.
Yeah.
What does this actually mean?
The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, which regulates drugs approval and marketing, set up some special programs for people that cannot enroll in trials. If you live in the boondocks somewhere, there's no clinical site to do a trial, so you're left alone. So for these people and for other people, there's 3 different programs. First one is called Treatment IND, for Investigational New Drug. And it's for drugs that are almost approved. Second one is Compassionate Use, and it's the same. It's for drugs that are not yet very well known, but for people who really need
Would these be drugs that have already been through phase 1 for toxicity?
Yeah, usually they have been through phase 1.
So they're not poisonous, but they're still new enough that they'd just be compassionate use.
And finally, recently, something was called developed that is called parallel track.
Parallel track.
Or, I mean, there's other ways to call that too, which is for people who failed on AZT, who are intolerant to AZT, who cannot get on the trial because they are too far away or because they are not eligible for the trial. These people can get drugs, and in this case it's DDI and DDC. And their physician, for all these special programs, the physician has to call the company, their special 1-800 number for each drug, and the company gives the drug for free to the physician, and they collect the data too. So that's a good way for people that are really unable to enroll in a real trial to get the new drugs anyway.
Now, DDI and DDC, these are the newer drugs that are believed to be like AZT,
yeah,
but there's a difference.
They are the same family of drug as AZT, but they are way less toxic. Especially DDC seems to be almost no toxic. And there's a new one called AZDU that is tried right now and seems to be really has no toxicity whatsoever. So it's very promising. Because AZT is very toxic.
It has a lot of liver problems for a lot of
bone
people.
marrow.
Now, there were also, weren't there pancreas problems for people on DDI
yeah,
originally, too?
This story has been a little exaggerated, I think. What is known now is that if people had problems with their pancreas or liver before the DDI, and especially IV drug users and people which liver is really bad, these people tend to develop pancreas inflammation, and they may die of that. But it's only a few people, and the overall toxicity of DDI is way less than AZT. But for some reason, scientists that were not very pleased with the parallel track way of doing things leaked some false information to the New York Times. We put that a big hype on that, and that was the story. But DDI is less toxic than AZT.
But DDC is less toxic than DDI.
Yes,
oh, so
and AZDU is less toxic than all of those.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
For someone who wants to be in a clinical drug trial, be it parallel track or be it the actual trial, how do they get involved? What would they do if someone tomorrow morning said, I need to get in this
The
test?
first thing is to contact someone who knows about what's available in town.
Like you?
Yeah, you can call APLA and can call me, and your physician may know too, and talk with friends, read the press, and when you see something you're interested, I mean, you can call APLA, and we will give the people different trials they are eligible to, where they can enroll. And then they can contact the trial sites and shop around. I mean, usually you have time to go around, check each of them, and see the one you like. Because it's a long commitment. It's usually for 6 months, a year, 2 years. And you really need to feel good when you go into a trial so that you can stick with it.
Now, when you talk about eligibility for a drug trial, what are some things that would make someone eligible or make someone not eligible, not be allowed to be in it?
These are called criteria of inclusion and exclusion. And they are, different things that usually are related to the person's history, health history, or their blood parameters. For example, the T-cell count, whether they had an opportunistic infection or not, whether they have a lot of platelets, or if they have, not a lot of platelets, and history of drug use and age, and different characteristics. And you have to screen the patients to know if they apply. Why do they do that? It's because AIDS is a very broad disease with a lot of different diseases in the syndrome. And they want to study one particular population at one time during the disease progression. They want to have a homogeneous group, and also because some trials, some drugs could be toxic for some people. The best example is IV drug users. Their liver is not as functional as it should be, and drugs that are toxic for the liver would be very toxic for them. So they have to be directed in some trials.
So if you don't fit into one drug trial, you look for another that you qualify.
Yeah.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about the fact that most of these drug trials involve men, and primarily white men of a certain age, and that if you are a woman, or you are black, or you are Latino, or you are anything other than a white man,
that's really,
you may have problems getting into one.
A really big problem. And the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, are under pressure now from both the AIDS activists but also the Congress, because a lot of studies have been done on men and not on women. Why? It's a question of access to information, I think. They didn't outreach women enough. And for example, out of the AIDS field, the aspirin study about heart disease when you take one aspirin a day and so on was done on 20,000 people in the States for years. No women was enrolled in the trial. So we don't have any data on the effectiveness of aspirin.
We don't even know if this works on women.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, women have been ignoring this epidemic for a long time, and they develop a different set of opportunistic infections that are not in men, and people don't know about it. Even the physicians, they are not really aware of it. So there's a lot of things to do regarding women now.
Well, does this also create complications that a drug that might have made it through phase 1 toxic trials, is proven to not be poisonous, that made it through phase 2, if it was all done on men, if a woman with AIDS takes this drug?
With AZT right now, because they show that in mice, female mice, if you give AZT for a long time, you induce cancer. So they are really trying now to know if this is also true with humans. And also, you know, the hormonal, sexual hormones are different in men and women. So the interaction between the drug and the hormones may be different. And it's a very big problem. It's a problem for women, it's a problem for transsexuals that take a lot of hormones. And nobody knows the interaction between AZT and those hormones, too.
So you're trying to get drug tests broadened to include.
Yeah, and I mean,
everyone.
now I guess the NIH is really aware of that and is trying to outreach women and minorities of color and children and IV drug users to have a more diverse population in the trials.
Now, there's a lot of risks for anyone taking an experimental drug and going into a drug trial, and I know there's a lot of pros and cons to the situation. I understand there are consent forms involved and there is an interview process, and you had some things to remember for people who are going in and signing that consent form that are important.
Yeah, there's benefits and risks. Right. The benefits are that you're going to receive a new drug, and that's always interesting. Some people are really sensitive to the fact that they are doing good to the community, and also you're going to meet a lot of people. Because you make friends through trials. I mean, you're going to go through the same process for years, and people are all very often at the same stage of a disease, and so you can compare experiences, and that's a way to make friends, definitely.
One doesn't normally think of a drug trial as a social event, but you are in the same situation, and you would
You spend hours waiting in the same room. And the risks are either that you may be given a treatment that doesn't work, or you may give in the placebo. But you may have some side effects. That's the main problem, is that drugs usually are tried, especially in phase 2, with very high dosage. And the side effects are usually there, and then they decrease the dose. This was the case with AZT. The first people who took AZT as part of a trial had anemia, not enough, you know, not enough.
We're going to come back to that in a minute. We're going to take a break right now. We'll be right back.
By looking at them, but they're wrong. A person can have AIDS for a long time without showing any symptoms. So protect yourself. Not having sex is one way to avoid AIDS. Staying away from people who shoot drugs is another. If you do have sex, use a condom. It may be the most important thing you ever do. Because what you see may not be what you get. Help protect yourself against AIDS.
I'm seeing Madonna, and we were talking about the pros and cons of being in a drug trial. People are informed of this before they go in, and there are consent forms to be filled out.
Yes, there's a lot of ethical issues involved in clinical trials because you're using people's body to test a drug. So when people go and if they qualify for a trial, they can be enrolled, they have to sign what is called an informed consent form, which is a legal document saying to the patient what are the risks, what they have to do during the trial, all the things they will have to do, and explaining them what the trial is. And this has to be done in the patient's primary language, in writing form, and they have to explain every single word of it. So the patients, if they enroll, if they don't understand something, they have to ask. And several times if they have to understand everything that is being done to them.
I've heard you mention bringing a friend with you to the drug trial?
Very often they give a lot of information just talking to people, but not in written form.
Oh, off the record.
Yeah, so you need, I mean, it's interesting to have a witness so that you're not the only one who heard that. And also it's interesting to bring a friend to that, because when you're finished with it, when you go home, you're going to have to decide whether you want to enroll or not. And it's interesting to talk with someone that you trust and that experienced the same thing, I mean, knows what you're going to get into. And it's really useful to have a friend at that time.
One of the misconceptions about drug trials and experimental treatments that I think a lot of people may have is that if you sign up for an experimental drug, that's all you need to do, that all your medical needs, they're going to take care of you completely. This is not, however, the case, is it?
That's not true. Although the physicians that are in charge of trial will take care of their patients, and if they develop a problem, they will take care of them, they are not going to take care of all the basic needs, medical needs of people. So it's very important to have a physician, to keep your physician, and keep your physician informed about the fact that you're on a trial, so the physician can call the trial, get your lab results, and network with the researcher.
To continue seeing your own doctor for any other needs and keep him informed of exactly what's happening.
If you go in a trial for PCP, the pneumonia, you're going to the scientists are not going to take care of your candidiasis or other infection. I mean, yes, if they see it, they're going to tell you, you should get treated for that, or we should do something. But very often they don't have time to do that.
What are the costs involved? Do they charge people money to be in a drug trial?
It depends. I mean, usually the drug and the basic costs are covered by grants, either from the government or drug companies or the FDA. But sometimes there are some side costs that are not covered. And it's very important for patients to go and, before enrolling, ask how much it's going to cost me. Do I need an insurance? Is medical covering it?
Are there hidden charges?
Yeah, and usually when you start like that, there's no problem. Mm-hmm. They always find a way to bill that to either your health insurance, if you're okay with that, or medical, or the drug company. I mean, they always find a way to do it. It's very important to tackle this problem at first before you enroll, rather than receiving a bill and saying why. Okay, it's very important. People have to clear every single detail before they enroll, because that's the time where they are powerful.
Often aren't the tests. The drug is free, but sometimes the tests are extra.
Yeah, I mean, some tests that are part of the protocol will be paid by the grant. But if the physician decides that he wants something else for his own interest, or just because he thinks that would be good as information, he's going to have to bill it somewhere.
Now, are there situations where people are paid for being in a drug trial, where they receive money?
It happens, especially with drug companies' trials.
The drug companies.
For example, there's a trial going on at UCLA right now about mouth rinse for candidiasis, and people are paid for that. But it's very unusual, very unusual.
What are some of the rights of patients? You've talked about consent. You've talked about if things go wrong and having a witness and knowing your charges. Are there sometimes disasters here where things go wrong if someone is in a drug trial and it doesn't work, or they have bad effects? Do they have recourse?
Yeah, the big problem is what happens when the new drug fail, or someone's health got really worse during a trial. What happens? Different things. Either they change. I mean, if the person has been receiving the new drug, they're going to give something else. Mm-hmm. Usually they're going to stop there and give something else in hope that's going to work. If the person has been on placebo, they're going to usually give the drug to the person that was on placebo. They unblind the trial, meaning that they open the secret code for that person, and if they were taking the placebo, they're going to give that person the drug. But all this should be told to the patient before.
Up front.
Clear everything. And we have, at APLA, we have clinical trial forums where we give all this information to people with list of questions they can ask to the
I saw your handout. It's several pages long. There's pages and pages of questions, and you teach people how to do this so that if they're going to go out...
they understand why the questions are there, and then they can ask the question and get all the information before.
And save trouble later. What are some of the drug trials that are available right now? What are some of the drugs that are happening in LA that people should know about?
In LA County, there's almost 100 different trials going on. There's a lot of things. And some of the most interesting now are trials involving, for example, a new drug with a long name called pentosand polysulfate. That is one of the drug against Kaposi sarcoma that Gallo talked about and is hitting for a while now. But some people got hold of that, and there's a trial starting in LA to see the effect of this drug against Kaposi sarcoma and HIV disease in general.
Is this a phase 1, just the dosage
one? It's a phase 1-2. They can try different dosages, but they're looking for effectiveness of the drug.
So this would probably be a very good one to be on. If someone has Kaposi's, they would be going right into the phase 2.
It's very promising. There's also a very good study going on at UCLA right now, a phase 1 study involving AZDU, which is like AZT but without toxicity. And it seems to be very, very promising. I mean, it's like as effective as AZT without the toxicity, which is really promising. Some people are trying compound Q, the famous
Is compound Q, that was the famous Chinese cucumber.
Yes.
It was very popular. Apparently, there were stories that some people died taking it.
Yes.
What happened with compound Q?
Well, compound Q is being tried in LA and in San Francisco and other places, and it seems to be interesting for people that are not too sick, but it's toxic. So definitely, I mean, don't take compound Q by yourself. Do that with a physician if you want to do it. So there's some people in LA doing that. Other interesting trials, more people are being interested in AIDS dementia now. So there's some trials involving AZT, involving antidepressant, also the effect of antidepressant on the immune system. That are some of the new studies.
So they're now looking at drugs that may prevent the mental disorders and the dementia and problems that people are having with HIV.
Yes, finally, they are interested in that. And there's also a study going on involving passive immune therapy.
Passive immunotherapy,
when
right.
they take plasma from HIV-healthy patients and they give it to HIV-sick patients. And there's a study starting in September involving 225 patients, something like that.
Are there any studies right now with women? Right now in LA?
Yeah, there's a couple. I mean, all the studies in general are open to male and female patients.
Okay.
But there's a couple of studies that are for female patients, but usually for female patients that are bearing a child during pregnancy.
Do the pregnancy?
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's an interesting study with drugs and
But
pregnancy.
it's interesting
That's
to
a
see
whole
that
issue.
women are considered as the carrier of the baby, and there's no study for, especially for women that are not carrying a child.
So the AZT drug trial way is to see how the drug works on the unborn child, not the woman involved.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm interested in the vaccine studies that's been going on. I read in your article in the APLA magazine that you had done work in Central Africa. You had been there for some of the HIV vaccine research. What's happening with that?
Yeah, I was working there when they began to try HIV vaccines on chimpanzees early in '84. And they've come a long way since then, and now it looks very promising. There was, for example, a study at USC where they used part of the virus to stimulate immunity in patients that are infected but are not symptomatic. And it seems to have a very positive effect in postponing the progression of the disease. And I mean, there's a lot of things going on around vaccine. I think I'd say in the 5 years from now, we should have at least in experimental trials a vaccine.
So you're optimistic about the vaccine possibility.
Vaccine research. I think now they have isolated which part of the virus produce the good immunity, and they are starting to understand how they can stimulate the two arms of the immune system, the T cells and the B cells, and make them network together to have a good immunity. So it's very promising, yeah.
Your original work was in veterinary medicine,
yeah,
wasn't
I'm a vet, yeah.
Now, how did you come from being involved in veterinary medicine to winding up in Los Angeles and being a clinical trial specialist and working in Africa? How did you get here? This is incredible.
I mean, being a vet, and I mean, AIDS is very interesting because there's a lot of disease exactly like that in animals. So when AIDS began to appear, before the virus was isolated, vets all around the world say, it's exactly like this disease and this disease, so it's probably a virus. And a lot of analogies like that. And then I went to Africa to work on different things, and I got interested in the vaccine research. And then I came to the States 4 years ago to do research on the brain, because I was interested in the brain at the time, and began to be involved with ACT UP in the treatment issue subcommittee, and published AIDS clinical trial directory for ACT UP, and one thing another.
So if someone wants to get into a clinical trial, they can contact you at AIDS Project Los Angeles.
Definitely.
And what would you tell someone who's watching right now who had AIDS, who's interested in a clinical trial?
Well, call me, give me a little bit of information before, then we'll have an appointment. And usually what I do, I explain the different trials that I've selected for them. I give them information about each of them as complete as possible. And then they go and contact the people. And then they come back and we talk about the different choices they have, and we make a decision together, and then they start the trial.
So you're sort of a matchmaker.
Yeah, the matchmaker, that's exactly what I am.
If you need to know more about clinical trials, you can contact AIDS Project Los Angeles, 962-1600. And this is Stephan Korsia, and I'm Allison Arngrim. Thank you very much for watching AIDS Vision.